Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Lads Garage. My Falcon here is being held up by a few things, but what we're going to take care of today is the belt system. I will have an alternator, a generator, therefore I have no way to put tension built, so I have no water pump. So stay tuned, we're going to take care of that. So the very first time I decided I was going to do the generator to GM one-wire alternator conversion, the hardest part I had finding out was finding out what alternator to order. So anyway, I'm going to let y'all in on that. What I do is I look up a 1975 Chevrolet Nova, and they were available with one-wire alternators. Just when you go to order, look at things real carefully and make sure you get the one that says GM Universal One Wire. Actually, for this video, I initially made a mistake and ordered the wrong alternator to begin with, but nonetheless, for both the Fairlane and the Falcon, I used the one that's specified for GM One Wire Universal, and as long as you do that, you should be fine. I'm sure that Camaros and some other cars would work just as well, but I just went with a Nova, and it's worked for me. So anyway, the first order of business here will to be get the bracketry straight. The old generator bracket has to come off, and we got to put new alternator brackets on. Now, when I did the conversion on my Fairlane, I did try to make the generator bracket work, and it won't. Believe me, I tried. It just interferes. There's no way to make it work. So anyway, we got to unbolt that and replace it with new bracketry for alternator. Now I got this off of I think I got it off eBay. I might have gotten it off Amazon. I don't know where I got it. But one thing that's helpful when you're messing with these old Fords is when you look up a part that's kind of universal to the engine, it's not specific to a car, is just tell the search engine that you're working on Mustang. I put in 65 Mustang alternator bracket, and I had a whole bunch of choices pop up, and some for really good prices. You put in, or I put in 64 Falcon alternator bracket, 65 Falcon alternator bracket for a $289, and I got a few choices, and it's the same engine, everything's the same. It's just, excuse me, it's just that if you put in a Mustang, you cast a much wider net. You can also do the same thing if you got inline six. If you're working with a Ford and you got a 390 or a 428, you might have to put in like a 69 Mustang, but still, it should all work out. So anyway, little tip there. Well, let's go ahead and get these generator brackets off and start installing our Mustang brackets. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Heater hoses make it a little difficult to find the bolts, but we'll get it. Too big. That's 9/16. Let's loosen her all up. Now, when I left y'all last time, I can't even begin to tell y'all how disappointed I was at the end of the last video on this car when I had to essentially give up on getting the thing running and driving. I did get it running. However, good stuff. Driving was another thing altogether. And the reason I made the decision I did was pretty simple. I didn't want to do the same work twice. There's no sense in having to go buy another master cylinder just to
use temporarily. Just go ahead and buy everything at one time, get the brakes converted, be done with it. Tell you what, this bracket, I'm not sure why, because it's the same engine really, came off a whole lot easier on the Fairlane than this Falcon. And maybe it's because I missed a bolt. It's a different size bolt, that's alright. I brought several wrenches with me. Yeah, she's coming off now. There we go. And that also is removing the very, very sketchy battery cable. So yeah, here. So anyway, here's the bracketry for the alternator. And chrome may not get you home, that's what I'm using. So anyway, old bracket's off. Time to try to get the new one on. The new one does not attach at the same spot. It attaches to the water pump. I need to get in there, get the old bolts out. Alright, I was just wiggling on the fan just then. Reason for that, I want to see the general condition of these water pump bearings. If that thing started wobbling, I probably would have just aborted this whole video because I was going to have to change the water pump. But looks like that won't be necessary. It's like I need a 1/2-inch opening wrench. I got one and it's a gear wrench. Well, it's cobalt, but same difference. Alright, one issue I'm having today with the Falcon I didn't have with the Fairlane is that the pulley is holding the belt in. So I'm actually going to have to remove the pulley, which means I'll probably have to remove the fan. I do not remember having this trouble with the Fairlane. But I also changed the water pump on the Fairlane, so maybe that's why I don't remember it. I don't know. Gotta see if I can just loose it without taking it all the way off. There we go, got it loose. Put the bolts back. Hopefully with less fuss. I've got the bottom bolt in. Put the top one in. And we got it tight. So anyway, we got our top bracket on. Now, put the bottom bracket on. I think I'll do that while the fan's still loose. Alright, so I got the top bracket on. As for the bottom bracket, ladies and gentlemen, you have not heard me cuss on this channel. Evidently, somebody's trying to test that. So, somebody along the lines years ago replaced this water pump. And evidently they lost one of the bolts. And rather than doing the honorable thing and just finding another one and putting it in, they just left it out since it was on the bottom. Nobody will ever notice. So anyway, I've gone all over the garage looking at all kind of bolts, trying to find a replacement. Taking some out of the water pump, moving them, see if I can find the right one so I could at least go to a hardware store and get what I needed. Turns out one of the ones that held the generator in just so happens to be hopefully the right size, at least the right thread and the right diameter. So I'm going to put that on here. And hope like heck it'll work. And I'll have to go to the hardware store and buy another one. If I do, it's not the end of the world. Just seems awful long. It is bottomed out. So anyway, it's getting dark. I hadn't eaten yet. I'm sure the wife's gotten off work now. She likes to spend time with me. I love to spend time with her. So I'm going to call this an evening. I'm going to have to go to the hardware store and get a shorter version of this bolt. But at least I know which bolt I need. So I'll see y'all on another day. But I'll be back. Don't worry, we're going to get this car fixed. Alright, so welcome back. It is the next day. And I didn't make it to the hardware store last night, but I looked around in my boxes of bolts and all, and I managed to find one that fit the bottom. So I got the bottom bracket on already. As for the top, I'm going to need a bolt that runs between the bracket and the engine block. And I just found a bolt I have around that had the right size threads and measured it out from the front of the bracket, right here, to the engine block. Then now I'm going to need a 6-inch bolt. So anyway, I'm still going to have to go to the hardware store and pick one of them up. But for now, I'm going to mock up everything and do the stuff I need to do to make this Chevrolet alternator fit on Ford. So in place of a top bolt, I'm just using this carriage bolt that's a size too small. I'm just sliding it through the hole, sliding it into the engine block, and it's just going to sit there and hang out. And that's good enough for what I'm doing today. So anyway, got my, I guess I'll say remanufactured alternator here. Right the other day. There we go. Yeah, here. So here is the new alternator, or if you prefer charging whirler, we can say that. It's trying to tell me something in Spanish here. I don't know what it's trying to tell me, but I'll just ignore that. So what I'm going to do here, pull my carriage bolt out real quick, push the adjusting bracket down. Get this out of the way. I'm not using that right now. So right now it's pretty much in place. And one issue I had when I did the fairing was the pulleys weren't lining up. Now a V-groove belt as opposed to a serpentine is a lot more tolerant of poor alignment. Nonetheless, it was still something we had to address. We'll get to the squeak after a while. I figured out what it is. It's not good. But anyway, to figure out how much you need to shim your pulley out, it's not that hard. I just find the straight edge. I think last time you used a level. I see a piece of angle iron over there I'm fixing to go get. There now, this will do fine. And you just hold this flat across your crankshaft pulley, like so. You see how it looks on your alternator. Really, I had to do some shimming on the fairlane. I don't think I'm going to have to shim this one. I'll be. Well, that's a surprise of a pleasant variety. Because I ain't going to have to shim this thing. Maybe I might have to send it back just a hair. I wonder why they're different. Alright. So I'll just go through the basics since it looks like I'm not going to have to shim this one. In order to shim it, it's not a hard project to do at all. Let's see, I'll take my alternator out so I can show you again. Alright, so if you need to shim it, it's not hard. You stick a screwdriver just inside one of these vent holes here and you go just inside. And then you take a wrench or an impact or something, you take this nut off, and there's a lock nut under it, or a lock washer under it, excuse me. And between the fan and the pulley, just stick a couple washers, however many you need. The fairlane took 2 washers, and you put it back together. Now, the downside to this was when I went and did the fairlane, I didn't have enough room to put my lock washer back in. You darn sure don't want this to come off. So I put some red never come off juice, in other words red Loctite, on this shaft here when I put the nut on. I tend to try to avoid using that stuff because, I mean, most things, you know you have to take it off someday, but the pulley on alternator, I really saw no reason once I had it shimmed right that I would ever have to take it off, so I did use the red never come off stuff for that. So anyway, I'm back to being stuck by not having a bolt, but that's alright. I can do a little lever prep in the meantime. Now some people swear up and down that the way to do a generator to alternator conversion on a Ford is to use the Ford 3G alternator. And there are several reasons for this, and really they are excellent alternators. I have nothing against using them. The reason I choose to use a GM alternator is pretty simple. I'll show it to you. My Ford Thunderbird right here actually has the Ford 3G on it, and I'll show you. Just look at it. It looks modern. And my personal thoughts are if I have a vintage car, I want something that looks vintage on it. Also, the way that they tie in is through these plugs. So to make one work, I have to go to a junkyard and pull plugs out of them. And it does have a serpentine belt on it. Changing it over to a V-groove belt wouldn't be a problem. But I just think that using one of those alternators would look out of place. Okay, so this is my 1967 Galaxy. And that is the alternator. That is a period correct alternator for one of these cars. And we can see how it looks with the external fan and such. This is what I recently replaced, but this is the actual period correct Ford 1G alternator. The only issue really with these is they are not internally regulated. So you have to make up a wiring harness and go to a external voltage regulator. The Ford 3G, as well as the GM1 wire that I'm using on the Falcon that I used on the Fairlane, they're all internally regulated. And here's my 64 Fairlane with the GM alternator. And as you can see, the GM alternator looks very, very similar to the Ford 1G, and it's internally regulated, so it's a whiz to wire up. You also look in there close, see if I can get y'all in here. Right in there, you can see where I shimmed the pulley out. I got 2 washers in there. Try to show you. Alright. And like I said, on the end of a pulley, the nut, it's got the red Loctite holding it on there.
Okay, so the next step in this whole conversion is going to be making up the 1-wire for the 1-wire conversion. And to do that, I'm using a piece of 10-gauge wire. Actually, when I did my Fairlane, I bought a 5-foot section of 10-gauge wire, cut it in half, used 2.5 feet, so that's going to give me enough to do 2 cars. And the reason I chose yellow was, well, when I went to order it, it was the cheapest. So anyway, just strip off a little bit each end. So I'm using the right gauge, 10. The reason I use 10 is because before I did the Fairlane, I didn't know all that much about doing these conversions. So I just went on the interwebs on the Fairlane page and I asked what size wire I should use. And the wire size that was suggested was 10 gauge. So that's what I went with, and it's worked well for me. So I see no reason not to use it for this project and future ones. Also, you notice I'm using these to crimp instead of these. I just found out that these do pretty good for stripping. But these crimpers right here are not expensive. You can get them online. I've seen them at Lowe's. Pretty much any place, any hardware store have them. But they just do a whole lot more reliable crimp job. And just like that, the wire's made up. So anyway, my next order of business, the other night my wife and I went out and we stopped by Tractor Supply to pick up some dog food. And I went to get the bolt to do the top of the alternator on that. Thing is, there was a little bit of an unplanned trip, so I didn't take the one that was too short, but I found they had the right size already for me. I didn't take that with me, so I guessed. And I guessed wrong. I got one that was too small in diameter. I got the right length, but not big enough around. So that means I'm about to run to the hardware store and get another bolt. It's not a big deal, it's right up the road. A little goofy thing about me is when I'm just running out to the hardware store or the auto parts store to pick up something for one of these old rides I'm working on, I like to take another one of my old rides. It's goofy, it's fun, so I think I'm going to take my Fairlane up to the hardware store and get me the right size bolts. I also got something to compare it to, so I know I do it right this time.
So, we hope this is the correct alternator. Set it down there real quick. Stick this in here to hold it. There we go. Now let's see if we're lining up. It appears as if we are. That is A-okay with me. And we got it mocked up in there. Next thing, I'm going to take this tape measure and I'm going to see how big a spacer I need. And that's right at 3 inches. And to make my spacer, I'm going to go to the other side real quick. And I'm going to cut a piece cast iron nipple of pipe 3 inches long put it in there. I'm also going to paint it black. Alright, so that stuff dried real quick, which is great. Now if you don't want to go through cutting this stuff, you can just get a 3-inch nipple or whatever size you want from the hardware store. I just got a whole bunch of these because many years ago I used to make all these industrial lamps and all out of pipe stuff. And that worked pretty well till it became a fad and these Chinese knockoffs came in and made it so it wasn't profitable anymore. They were selling lamps for less than it cost me to make them. But anywho, alright, so I got it tightened up on there. I'll double check this again. Everything's looking good. Now one thing I thought of after I put this in is I think I might want to put a little bit of the blue never come out juice on the threads. I just think it might be a good idea. Certainly won't hurt anything. But since one day I'm pretty certain I will have to change the alternator, I don't think I want to put the red on there. So here we go, 242 blue. I'm just going to dribble a little bit of that in there. It's way too much. That should do nicely. And waited a minute. I'll go ahead and tighten her back down. So we got the top hung. The bottom be a little bit easier. Comes with a bolt down there. Got that out. Just go pick up on the adjustment bar. Now Ford in their great wisdom thought it'd be a good idea to put the adjustment underneath the alternator. So you can't see what you're doing. It makes it kind of a challenging job to put tension on it. But, oh well. At this point I'll take my belt, which I'm using a Gates 7400. All the catalogs call for a 7405. I find that to be a little too long. I never could get tension on it. So I'm using a 7400. That's what I used on the Fairlane. And to be completely honest with y'all, on the Fairlane I probably could have used a 7395. But 7400's working. And that's what I'm going to use on this. Feeling down there on the adjustment bracket, I think I'll be fine. Now since a little time's passed, I've forgotten I'd loosen the fan up, so I'm going to go ahead and put my fan back on before I get my final adjustment, just because my water pump pulley is a little cattywampus. Now since I released the revival video on this car, one thing a few of y'all have taken me a task on was not unhooking my fuel line from the carburetor before running it. And I probably failed to mention that when I got the car, the fuel line was unhooked at the fuel pump. So that's why you didn't see me unhooking it. It was already unhooked. And since it was already unhooked, I didn't even think about mentioning it. Alright. So now it's just time to put a little tension on this alternator. I got my pry bar. Trying to find something decent to pry off of. Which has been a little easier said than done. Lord, Mr. Ford, why'd you do it this way? So after trying about 16 different combinations of wrenches, I still don't know if I found one yet. Alright, so now I think I found the better spot to pry with. Got the wrench like I want it. Yeah, that'll do good. Seems like we got tension on the belt, and there's a little bit of adjustment left in it. So, we got the alternator installed. We got the belt on it. Now, we gotta get some juice out of it. I think one thing I learned before is it's easier to put the wire on first because it's way down at the bottom. That seems to be something I remember now that I'm having to do it like this. So I'm going to do it the wrong way. I'm going to put the wire on with it already on. Yeah, it's not the end of the world. It's not hard to do. Got this wire I made up the other day. I guess while I had the nut out too, I should have figured out if it was a 7/16 or a ½ inch. I'm going to go ½ inch because, well, it's a Ford. Exactly. Figure if I only had one, it'd be the wrong one. It's a 7/16. Alright, so 7/16 is what it wants. That's what I shall do. And then we take the other end of this one wire, we put on the solenoid. Knowing what I know about Fords, let's see if I may have to move y'all a little bit. You see it? Alright. So next thing we're going to have to attach this one wire to the solenoid. And looking at this thing, oh Moses, it's another bad cable. Got to replace on that. And knowing what I know about these solenoids, probably would not be a bad idea for me to change this one. Would not be a bad idea at all. Wish I thought about that when I made my parts order. Red cable off. Inspect it while I'm at it. Yep, I got off of one good cable on this car. Cable back on. Up here there's a provision for a ground wire. I don't guess you have to have that, but I tend to think that grounds are a good idea. So I'm going to add a ground wire right there. Which I'll make up in a similar fashion to how I did the charging wire. I'll probably just use 12 or 14 gauge, whatever I got around. As long as I get a good ground, I'm covered. Alright, so I just attached the ground wire to the inner fender with that self-tapping screw. And one thing I almost forgot to mention is taking the voltage regulator out of the equation. Now, there is a one wire that comes from the starter solenoid to the voltage regulator, and at that terminal it meets up with the one that goes to the ignition wire. And that is a particular wire that you're going to want to keep. So I'm going to go ahead and unhook that. I believe it's always at the top of these, but always double check and make sure that your wires are what you think they are. This is black with a yellow stripe, and this one comes from the direction of the ignition switch in the harness. Now I'm going to just double check. Yep. Black with yellow wire does indeed come from the starter solenoid, so we're going to attach that over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these two terminals off, and then I'm going to put a yellow butt connector between them. Now, I'm not an electrician, and I'm not claiming to be an expert, because I'm not. However, I could see where you could just leave that in place and just use the old voltage regulator for your junction. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I mean, you may be able to do it just fine. I personally don't want to do that, so I'm not. Especially with the condition of the wires that were coming from the generator. I really want to make sure no juice is going through them. And I guess it'd be possible for it to backfeed. And we don't want that to happen. Anyway, this is ignition wire. Ignition, yeah. Just put my yellow butt connector on there. They really make you open these all the way to crimp it. I guess that's fine. Crimp her down. Get her all the ooga-doogas. Let go. There you go. Now we're going to come from the other side. Probably should have done that one first. Oh well. I guess if you want to, you could put some heat shrink on this. It'd probably be a good idea. But I'm just going to be okay with this. There. So that'll wrap up the conversion from the old Ford generator to the GM one-wire alternator. So thank y'all again for tuning in for another episode of Two Labs Garage. Hope y'all learned something from this video. I really stand behind the conversion going to the GM one-wire alternator from the Ford generator. It's a whole lot better system. I looked up last night, the generator puts out 30 amps. This GM alternator puts out 63, so you got over twice the capacity on it and a much more modern, reliable system. There's a reason the manufacturers went away from using the generators in favor of alternators. Now, if you could please go ahead, hit that like and subscribe button. They really help the channel out a lot. They help me bring you more and better content. I got more stuff on the way. As soon as I turn the camera off from this, I'm going to go get a different hat on, and I'm going to start doing the disc brake conversion on this. If you remember the episode where I got this running, the deal breaker was being able to stop the thing. I wouldn't go spend the money for a style of master cylinder that would be used just for a test drive and then be taken off in favor of a new system. It just didn't make financial sense. So anyway, getting ready to start changing this to disc brakes. Also, that squeak you keep hearing on the video. Yes, both my front shocks, the bushings are absolutely shot on, so every time the car moves they squeak. I got some new shocks in. I'll be putting them in soon. Probably wait till after I'm done with the brakes, but you never know, while I got the wheels off I might do it. But anyway, have a good day. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.